I don't know what happened and why it wasn't working, but when I closed it down and opened it back up, it worked again. So, welcome everybody. Hopefully you can hear me and see me again. Hopefully you were not waiting too long. We had some technical difficulties, so I will through a few things. But again, if you want to join tomorrow, we can do that, or if you want to stay on longer, that is certainly fine with me. But I know many of you may need to jump off and get to the curriculum night events of your children. So questions wise, we have only a small number or a handful of people. So if you want to jump on and ask questions, you're welcome to do that too. Usually when we have the principal Q&A, we had over 100, so it was hard logistically. But if you want to pop on and just ask a question, that's okay. If you're not comfortable doing that, you can do that in the chat. So I'll go through a little bit of a few talking points. And if you have questions throughout, feel free to either interrupt me, which is fine, or provide a comment. So first of all, I want to say thank you to all those families, both RLA families and to the hybrid families. I know this is a very difficult time, and it is hard on staff, and it is also hard on families. So we have been getting so much appreciation and support from families, but we want to reciprocate that and say that thanks for the appreciation, but we appreciate you too, because it is difficult for everybody. And as we progress through the year, we don't want to forget how difficult it is or forget our appreciation, because those are the things that keep us together and keep us as a strong community. So this has been the first couple weeks of hybrid, and I'd have to say that the students have been doing a wonderful job being in here, and the teachers have been doing a wonderful job. And I know the RLA families have gotten into quite a rhythm. So again, thank you, and I'm glad that we are full-blown into a routine for everybody. I wanted to address a little bit some Glacier Ridge goals and some district goals that we've been working towards. It is extremely important to me to have an alignment of what we're doing and why we're doing it, and that helps the whole school community really know what our purpose is and why we're doing it. It aligns the staff, it aligns the school community, and it helps really identify what we're doing as part of our job. Our immediate goals right now have really been on wellness. And because, as I mentioned, this is a difficult time, and there's a lot of stress on families and staff and students especially, we want to make sure that their wellness is the main priority. I firmly believe, and the research says, that if we're not okay as individuals, then we can't do our jobs as well, we can't parent as well, and we can't function as well. So that really is an effect for adults and students alike, which is why we as a staff, as well as you as families, and as a school organization, we've really focused on staff, family, and student wellness. So we've done that in a handful of ways. First of all, you notice that in both RLA and the hybrid, we focused on building a classroom community and establishing those relationships. So although that may have slowed the progression and the rhythm and routine of instruction, that really was by design, so that way we could develop those relationships not only with the staff to the students, but amongst the students as well, which is certainly harder in a remote learning environment, and especially with remote learning families, which may have students from across the district. So that really has been the targeted intervention for wellness. But we're also looking at some other things. Lori Kuhn has been very active with providing resources now that her guidance lessons are starting to be pushed out for both hybrid and remote learning. Or she's also going to start running lunch bunches, which will help build connections and relationships between RLA families and hybrid students. And then we're also continuing to focus on inclusion, both inclusion on the RLA family so that they continue to feel like they are included as part of a Glacier Ridge student, and then inclusion just within our students in general. So those are tentatively our most immediate goals that we've focused on right out from the gate. But there's also been a couple others that we've focused on too. The first being instruction. And we were thrown for a loop last spring with instruction and having to do it remotely. And we wanted to make sure that we improved upon that instruction from the spring. So for those RLA families, you may have noticed that there's a little bit more structure and there's more check-in points and there's more consistency across the district as well as within Glacier Ridge. So that's the first one. We also want to make sure that we have clear communication. So families know how they're getting the rhythm of communication from the teacher, where the instructional materials are posted, how are you going to get information from the teacher that may not be academic content information, but just reminders and just general information about maybe when MAP assessments are, or just reminders about classroom events. So you'll hear the classroom teachers talk about that this evening as well. And then the last thing that we focused on within our instruction and building upon our quality from the spring was purposeful instruction. We heard significantly from families that it was a good job for having to switch on a dime, but we want to make sure that we're Dublin City Schools and that we are continually improving and providing a high quality education. And although this is not an ideal environment for a high quality education, we certainly can do better in terms of our instruction than we did in the spring. Not to say that it was bad in the spring, but we had some time to reflect on it. So, and part of that will be purposeful instruction. Teachers knowing what they are providing, why they are providing it, and then communicating that to students about the lessons. So when students learn, when teachers teach, it is very important for everybody to know what's the purpose of this activity. Why am I providing it as the educator? And do students know what the purpose is so that they can really focus on that learning and that skill? So we call that in the education world the learning objective or learning target. So it may not be abundantly clear in the beginning because sometimes we want students to discover that, but we really want teachers to think through as they're planning lessons. It's not just entertainment of children at home. It is not just busy work. And it really should be purposeful instruction with a specific learning target, learning objective, and learning purpose. Again, feel free to ask some questions, and thank you to Melissa for posting Lori Kuhn's contact information. She's our local school counselor, so feel free. And she is providing support for both RLA families and hybrid families. And I know it's a little bit confusing because some RLA families may be assigned to a teacher at another building, but Lori Kuhn knows our kids the best. Even if you're a new family, she will continue to provide and get to know your students. The other thing we have built upon and really focused on is our what educators call formative assessments. And formative assessments are, how do we know your child as a learner? And I've really tried to be cognizant of our messaging and the experience of RLA families in particular, because we have called you frequently and said, hey, we need you to come into the building to take this test. And these are families that have said, for whatever reason, we're going to provide instruction at home. So although many of those assessments can be done remotely, they are easier done in person. But I want to reiterate, if you don't feel comfortable bringing your child into school, it is okay. There are alternative assessments that we can provide. But I do recognize, and I think the district recognizes that we've asked RLA families in particular to come into the building a lot. Not only that, but whether you're a hybrid family or an RLA family, you'll have noticed that there's a lot of assessments that we're giving. And some of these assessments you knew about in previous years, and some of them you didn't. So it feels like a lot. And teachers are masterful at administering these efficiently and effectively, so that way instruction is not lost. But we really value all of these assessments because they drive our instruction. And it's just one way that teachers get to know children and students as an academic learner. And then from that, we analyze that as a teaching team and then provide instruction. Sometimes that will look like small groups. Sometimes that will look like individual one-on-one, or sometimes based on that, if there are enough students that don't know it, we incorporate that skill into our whole group instruction. So that's what a good educator does, is they use what we call formative assessment, which is the data, to guide instruction, which is what we call differentiation, which means we cater to the different learning needs of all the students. So those are a lot of technical terms, but that's why we're doing instruction or assessments right now, to really guide our instruction. But the other part of that is just getting to know them informally, the informal assessments of just having conversations, just looking at their work, just analyzing what their answers are to some of the questions, just listening to some of their questions. That's often why teachers will ask students so many questions, because they're gathering that informal formative assessment to get to know them as a learner too. We are
Pete,
also, go ahead,
I have a
Melissa.
question. I've heard some parents ask about scores on those tests and if they ever get that data. And so correct me if I'm wrong, but some of the information will come during our conference nights in October when parents have those one-on-one with their teachers.
Yep, you got it. We never want our assessments to be a secret. Although, like I said, it is used to drive our instruction. Most of the assessments we communicate to families at parent-teacher conferences. Oftentimes, there's could be a big focus on the score or the percentile or the outcome. And although that is important because that measures benchmark growth, we also want to communicate that coupled with what skills are we focusing on. What skills are we focusing on based on our instruction? But all of that information will be communicated during parent-teacher conferences. And again, the assessments that we usually talk about are the MAP assessment. And oftentimes students know those scores, and you will get an email from the district with the score and percentile. But during parent-teacher conferences, staff and teachers will break down, here's your score and percentile, but here is what our areas of strength and growth for your child, and how I used it to guide my instruction. Same thing with the DRA. The DRA is a reading assessment, a little bit different than the MAP test, because the MAP test will have students read a passage and then answer multiple choice questions. The DRA, the developmental reading assessment, does have them read, and then the teacher asks them questions and really probes their thinking. Why do you think that? Predict what is happening. And you can get a little bit deeper and more refined information than you can from a multiple choice test. So although the MAP tests reading and the developmental reading assessment tests reading, we get different information from them. So those two assessments will be communicated during parent-teacher conferences. Kindergarten's also going through some assessments called the KRA, or Kindergarten Readiness Assessment, and that is a state assessment that is required, and it has everything from math to reading, as well as can students jump on one foot, and a little bit of coordination. So it gives a whole school, or a whole picture of students that the teachers are doing currently. The last assessment which some students are taking is called the DSI, or Developmental Spelling Inventory, and that assesses phonics and grammatical structure of students putting together grammar and phonics and parts of a word. And we use that to teach grammar and spelling. So those are the major assessments that we're providing. And again, there should be no secrets. And if you feel like you don't want to wait for parent-teacher conferences, which are coming up in the middle and towards the end of October, you can reach out to your child's teacher. You may want to wait for a little bit just because we are right in the middle of it, and the deadline for a lot of these assessments isn't until October 9th anyway. So it'll be very timely for parent-teacher conferences to receive that information. But again, although we will communicate the scores during parent-teacher conferences, staff and teachers should really be able to communicate, although here's a score, here's the strengths and areas of growth of your child, and here's how I use this information to provide my instruction. Some of the last things any other questions or any questions I can address? Okay.
Pete, the one other question that I heard parents ask about the MAP test in particular is the questions vary as the student goes along. Is that correct? And that depending on how they answer it, they might get a little more challenging one, or they might get a different one?
Yep. So the structure of the MAP assessment, the MAP is nationally normed. So it's administered across the country, and it's nationally normed for how, in general, each grade level should perform on that assessment. So with those types of questions, what they do is they push the student in more difficult questions as they progress through the test. So if a student can answer second grade questions and they're a second grader, they will keep going beyond second grade standards and start to test into third grade standards. So they will push a little bit into grade standards beyond their current grade. Now, I say that with a little bit of caution because a lot of families may say, okay, well, that means my child is performing above grade level. Absolutely, in certain content areas or certain knowledge-based skills. Again, though, what the MAP assessment doesn't always assess is really understanding of a concept because it's just multiple choice. It can't always assess real deep comprehension or explanation of why something happens. So the test does progress and get harder. And so that's how we, as I said, differentiate our instruction. We will teach beyond current grade level standards for a particular student, but we don't jump right to those standards. We want to make sure students know why there are concepts before we jump right to an upper grade level. A common controversial topic might be like multiplication. Students on the MAP assessment might be able to answer quickly multiplication tables because they've either worked with multiplication tables at home, memorized their facts, so they would progress pretty quickly in the MAP assessment because they can completely answer mathematical questions. But the MAP assessment does not get at number sense, which is really place value and understanding why those numbers work. The classic example is, do kids know why you carry the 1, and can they really dissect why you're carrying that 1 or carrying the tens place or carrying each place over? So they could know it procedurally, but we want to make sure that they understand it conceptually. So that the MAP assessment does progress, and each student has a very different experience.
I think for the RLA parents who had to sit there remotely with their students, they saw a different perspective. And that's where I think some of those questions came this week, because they were watching the questions come across the screen and be like, wow, my kid never has been taught that, but has that question on their test. And like you mentioned, it's because it advances that way.
Yeah, so that's exactly why. You're right. A lot of them may not have had questions that they have been taught before, but because that is beyond their grade level standard, and it is assessing, does the child know it already? And if they do, then the teacher can check for their understanding and then teach beyond that. So you're right. The other thing I will say is I think a lot of families feel like they need to support their students during these assessments. And that is so natural as a parent. I want my child to do well. I don't want them to fail. I don't want them to struggle on an assessment. And sometimes deep down, I know I feel this way, that my child's performance is a representation and reflection on me as a parent and how well I'm supporting them and how well I've provided instruction to them. But I will tell you, it's probably better from an instructional standpoint to let your child progress through those assessments naturally, because if the teachers are using those to design instruction, we really need to know what the students know on those assessments so that we can really fill those gaps or push them in other areas. Because if they do really well on the math assessment and we start teaching to where their math assessment says that they're ready to learn from, and they're not ready, then now we have to back off, so that's why we want accurate data. So I'll tell you, it's really hard as a parent to see your child, oh, you should know that, or remember, Johnny, remember to do X, Y, and Z. But we want to make sure that we know what their true abilities are. And of course, there's no judgment whatsoever and no worries regardless. I do want to talk a little bit about district goals. Well, before I get to that, I will say that we are designing more formal goals for Glacier Ridge, and we're meeting as a staff and designing a little more formal goals and measurable goals, because a lot of the things that I said were just tentative to start the school year. Transitioning a bit to district goals. The district is really focusing a lot on equity and inclusion, and that's not something that is new to Glacier Ridge. You could tell just from our motto and our recent initiatives of the Start with Hello, Find a Connection, Create a Friendship. We've been focusing on inclusion a lot. And but in terms of a district perspective, they're really taking 3 major steps as they guide staff through them, as well as through the students and the community. And just looking at the time quickly, it is 5:22. So if you need to jump off, you can feel free to jump off and head to your child's curriculum. So I want to talk a little about those 3 steps that the district is thinking about taking the school community through. And the first is really listen. And if you have read Michelle Borba's book Unselfie, or understood anything about empathy, empathy really starts with listening, and truly authentically listening without judgment. And we've gone through that with our school staff. And that's what we try to model, as well as teach our own kids. And listening without judgment to create empathy really establishes an understanding and appreciation for people's differences. And when people appreciate differences, naturally what comes from that is inclusion, because they don't single somebody out because they're different. They understand why somebody is different and appreciate that somebody is different. So truly listening to different people's perspectives. One of our own school initiatives with that was, at the beginning of the year, we solicited information from you in a survey, the family information survey, talking about a student's background and maybe student's language at home, or what do you want us to know about your child. We have sorted that data and just started to flip it out to classroom teachers so that they can help. They can use that information in their classroom meetings, so that way they know sometimes what holidays students celebrate, and what religions or backgrounds. I say all of that because sometimes I don't want people to think that what makes us individual is our culture or our religion, because that's not, I don't want people to think, okay, well, I may not go to church, or I'm not from a different country, or my family came from a different country 5 generations ago, so that now means I don't have diversity, or I don't have a identity. So really, when we talk about what makes up an individual, sometimes it's culture, sometimes it's religion, sometimes it's my own concept of myself. I enjoy soccer. Here's who I am as a family. Here's what I enjoy eating. So we want students to feel like and have a strong concept of self, which incorporates a lot of different components and variables. So the first is just listening and learning and listening and understanding different people's perspectives. The second step really is to learn. And from a district perspective, we are doing a district-wide book study. And our curriculum directors offered to the staff 4 different books that we could choose from as a staff or as an entire district. And they are, so you want to talk about race, white fragility, Stamped, and this book is anti-racist. So those books were chosen by the curriculum department, and each staff member had the opportunity to choose one of those, and then we will engage in various conversations throughout the year about those types of things. So listening is the first step. Learning about different individuals and perspectives is the second step. The last step, which we will probably not get to this year, and I think it's really important to establish those first 2 steps of listen and learn first. And the third is act. What do we need to do to make sure people feel included, and what actions do we want to do based on what we've heard, what we've learned, and then what are those next steps. I will tell you that at Glacier Ridge, in terms of our students, we will probably still act in a lot of various different ways to make sure students feel included and feel like they can have a voice. And we've been doing that for many years. So those are the steps, those are the perspectives from the district. Those are the goals for Glacier Ridge. I will communicate what our goals are throughout the year. So feel free to jump into PTO meetings, and then I'll most likely have principal Q&As throughout the year. I think this is one of those benefits of remote learning. Is it's sometimes difficult and inconvenient to all come to the school and hear the principal talk or hear to have access to school information, but remotely it is definitely easier to host things like this. So be on the lookout for that as well. Are there any questions? I know this is a Q&A and I did most of the talking, but what questions can I address, or what can I do to anything that you've been hearing in the neighborhood, anything that you may have had a question about based on what your classroom teacher has said? What can I address?
Hi, this is Simon. I will start with one question. First, I would really love to thank you for your effort to communicate. This is not easy with this new round of online curriculum, and the curriculum design is very thoughtful. I also appreciate the teachers. They really put enormous effort to make it work. As parents and even as students, they clearly feel it. Appreciate all those efforts. I do have a quick question. Given the, just put COVID aside, we heard that word too much. Just as regular flu season coming for the winter, do you have any means for the hybrid student when they are coming to school for the winter time, some extra level of protection, or any thoughts for their health?
Great question, Simon. First of all, thank you for your compliment. I always preface things with, we're not going to be perfect and we'll continually get better, but I'm glad you felt that instruction is purposeful and meaningful, because that is our efforts and design, of course. It is our fear too, getting to your question, it is our fear too that as we get into cold and flu season, that we can't always decipher between, is it a cold, is it allergies, is it the flu, versus is it COVID-19. I will tell you probably the first step for protection is definitely get the flu vaccine. If that's something that you value or believe as a family. The school is offering that again to students, and it's coming up on October. I don't have my calendar up.
It's October 2nd from 9 to 3, going to be hosted in the music room, and I'll try to find the link to that form for you real quick.
Awesome. Thank you, Melissa. So that's probably the first step of prevention is the flu shot. The second is a little bit difficult because it's going to ask students to and families to keep students home if they have multiple symptoms. And I will tell you, our school nurse, Kim Atherton, and our clinic aide, Judy Butterfield, have been fielding a lot of these questions because each scenario is significantly different. And it is very inconvenient to families, especially when you know that your child just has allergies or you know that your child may just have a cold. But that is unfortunately by design to really reduce the spread, because we don't want to shut down and we don't want students quarantined significantly and we don't want staff quarantined significantly. So we have a very careful scenario sheet of when students exhibit symptoms or what symptoms they have and what combination of symptoms. The clinic really goes through this scenario sheet and communicates with families. I would tell you that the best way to navigate that is identifying now the COVID testing site that would be most convenient for you. I will tell you that we're running into some pediatricians' offices will not, or they're hesitant to give COVID testing. So we're starting to really see which places will, which places won't, and we'll communicate that to families as we gather that information. But I would say begin to prep so that way you can get a quick COVID test, because that will allow students to come back in, because there's just no way on our end to be able to decipher between cold and flu symptoms versus COVID symptoms. But I will tell you, we are taking very careful precautions based on symptoms, so that way we reduce spread, which will allow more students to be in school more frequently. Does that answer your question, Simon?
Appreciate it. Very practical. Any additional thoughts with regard to the PPEs?
Yep. Right now, I know that the board has doctors. They have their COVID doctor committee. They're analyzing information from the Franklin County Department of Health. They're constantly looking at PPE guidance from CDC that has changed. An example would be the gaiters that students sometimes wear, and they're starting to do more research and will probably have more guidance of more effective PPEs. Right now, we have not heard that they are going to increase the PPEs. I know that a next step might be students are required to wear goggles, because I know the eyes are definitely susceptible location. But I will tell you, at all, students are physical distancing 6 feet away. The hardest times are arrival and dismissal, but they're all seated 6 feet away. We will take mask breaks, but we try to go outside. So we're taking precautions already, and we're just waiting for that board committee of doctors and professionals to make those additional recommendations. But as of now, we have not received any guidance at the building level. I do know that some of our staff that do have to work a little bit closer, Judy Butterfield is wearing a protective face shield in addition to a N95 mask and protective clothing. But right now, the requirement is just that everybody wears a mask and everybody washes their hands frequently. We have hand sanitizer everywhere, and then the physical distancing of 6 feet or more.
Thank you.
Any other questions I can address for anybody? You know, one thing that is most important is that if you do have a question, if you get off this call and think of something, or if you are somebody that prefers to get the answer more privately, I'm going to insert my email into the comments, and you can either email me personally. You're also welcome to call the school office. Unfortunately, our secretaries have become very knowledgeable about school procedures and health procedures. They can, if they don't know, they can refer you to the clinic but they are very well equipped to answer a lot of various questions, everything from health to instruction. But we want to make sure that your questions are answered so that you feel comfortable. One last question that I know that a lot of families have started to ask is, if my student or my child were to be quarantined, can they flip to a remote learning academy student? And although in an ideal world that would be great, so that way we could continue with instruction and it would be ongoing and effective. The hard part is logistically, we have physically pulled teachers from the building to become remote learning academy teachers. Consequently, they are not always available then to teach hybrid, and vice versa. So it makes it really difficult to move students back and forth because we just don't have the manpower or staffing to be able to do that. We identified how many students were going to be remote learning academy, and based on that, we pulled teachers to teach those classes and created that class size. So in an ideal world, we could flip students back and forth. And I'm not saying that all classes are full and we don't have the ability to do that, but I will tell you, for an entire district, we do not have the capacity to do that. So what we're doing when students are quarantined, the teacher has a couple of options. They're really trying to provide instruction the best they can. It's based on our guidance. We can't loop them into live instruction on a live Google Meet just for security purposes. But sometimes the teachers might be able to record that lesson either during or after, provide a little bit of instruction. And we're also providing the worksheets and things that would naturally be done in class. In addition to that, we also have instructional coaches that are also gathering materials to help the families and students with those instructional concepts at home. So it will be a little bit disruptive in terms of consistency of coming into the building and receiving that instruction, but we will try to get as many resources, instructional materials, and activities so that the learning can be as consistent as possible, knowing that we may need to catch the students up when they come back from quarantine a little bit.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So far, I have a 4th and 5th graders, and for like going forward, it sounds like most of their teachers are going to be self-contained. Is there going to be any like collaboration for like that you see like going forwards with like math or language or anything going forwards, or are they, the goal is for them to be mostly self-contained like for the semester or for the year?
Yep, good question. When we had to pull some teachers to be remote learning academy, it often made lopsided teams. We were all departmentalized in 4th grade and 5th grade. So 5th grade, for example, we had 4 teachers and they were departmentalized and they paired up, and one teacher would teach language arts and the other would teach math, science, social studies, but we had to pull one of those 5th grade teachers. So in that case, they all became self-contained. Could we have worked out a rotation of 3? Maybe, but that could also cause more communication issues and more confusion, not only for the students, but for the families in an already difficult and confusing world. But what I will tell you, Ms. Little, is that all of the teams are collaborating together. So even though they might be self-contained, they're probably all doing the same lesson or very similar lessons. And if you have any friends or neighbors that are in a different class, or you've probably seen some similarity, which is something that is really by design. One of our values as the Glacier Ridge staff is together we're better. And so I really put together strong teams that trust one another, that collaborate with one another. So one of the teachers may be a better math teacher than a language arts teacher, which is just natural human nature. But they are talking about it, they're learning together and providing instruction together. But the way you see it, it comes individually from the self-contained teacher. Any other questions?
Pete, and someone had private messaged me a question about the RLA teachers teaching in the classroom, and I did respond, or teaching from school. And I think that goes to to Ellen's question just now, that helps them work with their co-teachers that are in the building. So there's that collaboration that can go on.
Absolutely right. They are teaching in the building, and honestly, although my wife, who works in a business, is still working from home, we're very fortunate to be able to work from together in a building, because collaboration and communication is definitely sacrificed when we are all at our home talking through a computer. So although accessibility was there, effectiveness sometimes declined. So I say that because the RLA teachers and all of the teams are really able to collaborate very often. And oftentimes the RLA teacher is doing the same lessons and instruction as the grade level or the hybrid teachers. And again, that is by design as well, because in January, when everybody has the opportunity to either switch or remain, we want to make sure, because there's an opportunity for transiency, we want to make sure that a student coming from Remote Learning Academy that goes into hybrid is in a similar spot instructionally. Usually that doesn't happen. Usually we don't switch teachers and kids in classes in the middle of the year, but for family choice and for comfort, we decided to give that opportunity in the semester. But what that means is we have to pretty much be in the same ballpark. One variable that does change that a little bit is we still want to make sure we meet student needs. And student needs sometimes dictate how fast we go, how slow we go. Because if the class is not ready to move on in an instructional standard or concept, then we're not going to move on just for the sake of moving on. We want to make sure that they feel they have a good grasp in that instructional concept. But yes, absolutely, the RLA teachers are collaborating significantly with the hybrid teachers. Not only that, but the RLA teachers vertically in the grade levels, all the way, second grade all the way through fifth grade, they're also communicating a little bit less about instructional standards, because they obviously vary from grade level to grade level, but they are talking about communication ideas, effectiveness on how they organize their information, how they're communicating with families. So they're collaborating about their delivery model as well.
Ellen, I just wanted to say hi to my daughter Taylor is in your daughter Ruth's class. She's in Miss Bertram's as well.
I recognize we're kind of new, so it's nice to have a face to that. Nice to meet you.
Yes, and I think your husband had emailed our Glacier Ridge email box, our PTO box, before maybe you guys joined this year, and I remembered the last names and names as well. So just wanted to say hi.
Thanks, appreciate it. Thanks everybody. It's been good so far, so we appreciate all of your efforts and your work so far.
Yep, absolutely. The littles, if you don't mind me sharing, are new to Glacier Ridge. And of course, many families are new to Glacier Ridge. So as we get to know the new families, as we get to know the students a little bit, we want to make sure that they feel included and they feel a part of the community during a difficult transition time where we didn't have the same opportunities and activities that we normally would. So we are always open to feedback on how we can better support the transitioning families into Glacier. I am going to wrap it up if there are no other questions. If there's anything you can think of between now and tomorrow night, I'll do this again tomorrow night. Again, I apologize for anybody that was waiting for me. I'm not sure what happened with technical difficulties. Like if you joined late, I didn't realize there were people waiting, or it didn't show that there were people waiting. So I apologize for that. Hopefully that won't happen tomorrow. But thank you very much, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. I hope your child's curriculum night is productive and informative for you. And again, if you need anything, let us know.
Thanks, Pete.
Thank
Bye.
you.